You are listening to Book Clips, a mini podcast in which authors or narrators do readings from novels. Check out the show notes for the synopsis and buy links for this book.
Hi, I'm Sarah Ettritch, and today I will be doing a reading from Disobedience Means Death, the first book in the Rymellan Series. In this excerpt, Mo, one of the main characters, is thinking back to when she first realized she's a lesbian and attracted to her best friend Lesley, who she calls Les. She and Les had always been best friends. Growing up next door to each other and only 5 months apart in age, they were always together at family functions, at the Learning Academy, and at the Indoctrination Academy. Mo knew Les almost as well as she knew herself. She could talk to Les about anything. When they entered the Indoctrination Academy at 13 for their level 4, Les had been a fixture in her life for as far back as she could remember. She was like a part of the family. Around Les, Mo didn't have to be polite or pretend to be someone she wasn't. She could be herself. But then something changed. Suddenly, Mo felt self-conscious around Les. Did she sound stupid? Was she laughing in the right places? Did her hair look all right? Did she have a piece of lettuce from lunch stuck between her teeth? Half the time, she couldn't focus on what Les was saying, distracted by Les's blue eyes with their long, delicate eyelashes. Worse, she wanted to reach out and touch her hand, her cheeks, her hair. Forget the talking, she just wanted to gaze into Les's eyes. She even imagined herself sitting on Les's lap. At first, she didn't understand what had happened, but one day, during class, it all became frighteningly clear. Level 4 expanded on the basics of the Chosen tradition, covered during Level 3, and that meant sex education. Sure, she knew about sex, but up to that point she hadn't thought about it much, nor about whether she was diff or same-oriented. She certainly hadn't thought about it in relation to Les. They were friends. They knew everything about each other. Her feelings for Les weren't those types of feelings, she was sure of it. She didn't plan on having any of those until she met her chosen, if she had one. But on that excruciating day, the indoctrinator talked about sexual attraction and how sexual orientation was a discovery, something one learned about oneself, not something one chose. She sat in horror as he described exactly what she was feeling, and watched the large monitor at the front of the classroom in disbelief, as several adult solitary Rymellans, both diff and same-oriented, recalled their, quote, adolescent crushes, unquote. She could hardly breathe. She wanted to crawl under her desk and hide. Most of all, she did not want Les, sitting up front, to turn around. She was convinced that how she felt was plain on her face. She wouldn't be surprised if a bright light suddenly shone down on her and the indoctrinator said, "Now, class, I want you all to look at Mo Middleton. She's another example of a Rymellan with a crush, and on Leslie Thompson, no less." Mo left the class in a daze, her mind turning over the same question again and again. What was Les's orientation? It had never come up. They'd never discussed boys or girls in that way. Did Les know? Was she experiencing the same sorts of feelings as Mo, but for a boy? Would it affect their friendship if she was? Could they be as close, understand each other as much as they did now? Or at least as much as Mo thought they did? Well, that was enough for her. She didn't want any more of this sexual attraction nonsense. She wanted to feel comfortable with Les again. If she accidentally spat on her while talking, she didn't want to feel as if she'd just done the most embarrassing thing ever. If she stumbled and Les caught her arm, she wanted to laugh and thank her, not blush and wish it hadn't happened. She wanted back that familiar ease between them, along with the certainty that Les would always be her friend, no matter how dumb she sounded or how her hair looked. Who would want those other feelings? Not her. They were annoying and inconvenient. From now on, she'd pretend those other feelings for Les weren't there. Les came out of the classroom and walked toward her. "That was an interesting class," she said, shifting her notebook from her left to her right hand. "Yeah," Mo mumbled, her heart pounding. Les stared at her and shifted her notebook back to her left hand. "Do you—" The notebook moved again. "Do you know if you're same or diff-oriented?" she asked. Mo gulped and tried not to hyperventilate. "No," she managed to say faintly. Les must have the bluest eyes on the planet. "I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know. I've never experienced anything that would help me tell." They needed to open the windows. It must be 100 degrees in the corridor. "Oh," Les said. "What about you? What about you?" But the words wouldn't come out. She couldn't ask a question when hearing the answer terrified her. The moment passed. I thought I'd take a walk during break, get some fresh air. Want to come?" Les asked. "Sure," Mo said. A walk with Les would be great, as long as she didn't spit on her, didn't trip, and didn't forget herself and grab Les's hand. Les must never know that she had those sorts of feelings for her. Ever. Over the next few weeks, Mo noticed that she wasn't the only one who discovered her orientation. Actually, the signs had been there before, but she hadn't put two and two together. Now she understood why Simon and Judith spent most of their time grinning at each other like morons, and why Sheldon had stood and glared at Timothy at lunch one day, until Timothy had surrendered his seat next to Raymond. She'd even seen classmates kissing. Kissing! Feeling like she'd explode if she didn't tell someone about her own discovery, she decided to tell Mama and Papa on the next family visitation day. They nodded knowingly and smiled at each other. "You already know?" Mo asked. "We've known for quite some time, ever since your last appointment with the Chosen Council," Papa said. "They know then, you see, and tell the parents. But it's best that you find out yourself, when you're ready." But she wasn't ready, not if it meant she couldn't have back her old friendship with Les, the comfortable one, not the one they had now. Over Papa's shoulder, she could see Les chatting with her parents. They knew, they flaming knew Les's orientation. Did Les? Is that what she was talking about with them? Did she have a crush on anyone? Did she know how many of her classmates had a crush on her? Mo knew how many. A lot. She wasn't the only girl walking around in misery with Les the object of her affection. Last week at supper, she'd noticed Carolyn staring at Les from a nearby table, and her stomach had clenched when she'd recognized the look in Carolyn's eyes. She'd also lost count of the number of boys offering to carry Les's books, squeezing themselves in at the same table at meal times, and ogling her during class. Once Les had dropped her pencil, and Mo had almost been trampled in the stampede to reach it first, pick it up, and present it to her. Mo wondered how Les felt about the attention, whether it bolstered or bothered. They never talked about it. In fact, they never talked about anything related to sex, crushes, orientation, or the like. It was almost as if they had an unspoken agreement to not discuss what 90% of their classes were about, or the obvious displays of affection right in front of them every time they went outside on a break. Mo lived in fear that one day she'd round the corner of the sports equipment shed and find Les pressed against its side, kissing some pimple-faced idiot. The chances of that happening were slim, though, since she and Les were pretty much always together. If Les planned to go outside on break, she always asked Mo to go with her. She always wanted to sit together at meals, and she spent more time quietly doing homework in Mo's room than she spent in her own. Mo understood why. Les was using her as a shield against all the attention. She didn't mind. If Les wanted to stick to her like glue, that was fine with her. Despite the constant longing when Les was there, despite the ache to touch her, to feel her skin, to press her body against Les's, the almost physical pain when Les wasn't with her was worse. She tried not to think about the day when Les decided she no longer needed a shield. Les would have her pick of the boys or same-oriented girls. Mo knew it wouldn't be her. Even if she hadn't been Les's friend all those years and as familiar as an old pair of shoes, she was plain, and she didn't seem to be growing much. Anywhere. Les looked taller and curvier every time Mo saw her. So did most of the other girls. But not her. Sometimes she wondered if she had a defective mirror. Mo told herself that being Les's friend was enough, but deep inside she knew that wasn't true. One day, sitting directly behind Les and admiring the nape of her neck as Les peered down at her notes, she considered telling Les how she felt. If she knew Les's orientation, if she heard from Les's mouth that she didn't stand a chance with her, maybe she could let her feelings go, stop irrationally hoping, stop lying in bed at night doing with Les in her mind what she wished she could do with her in reality. Maybe they'd get their old friendship back. Yeah, and maybe she'd wake up tomorrow and the sky would be pink with red polka dots. The months wore on. Nothing changed. Before she knew it, they were due to leave the academy in less than a month. They'd go back to living next door to each other, not down the hall from each other. Mo dreaded it. A week later, she stood next to Les and stared out the lounge window, trying to decide if the grass was dry enough to go out and kick a ball around. It had rained most of the day, but the sun had come out a couple of hours ago and had been shining ever since. "We can go out and feel the grass," Les said. "Yeah, let's. We've been cooped up all day." Outside, Les crouched and ran her hand along the grass. It's a bit slippery. We'll be careful, Mo said, wanting to remain outside in the sun. I'll get the ball. She ran to the equipment shed, plucked a ball from the pile near the back, and stepped back into the sunlight. Les had moved away from the academy. She motioned for Mo to kick the ball to her. Mo dropped the ball, stepped back, then ran forward and kicked it. Good shot. Les hardly had to move. She kicked the ball off to Mo's right, forcing Mo to race toward it and snag it with her foot. It rolled slowly to Les, who promptly kicked it to Mo's left, then bent over, laughing. Oh, so that was how she was going to play, was it? Mo ran as fast as she could, determined not to let the ball get past her, though she'd have to kick it while still in motion. Almost there. She swung back her leg and whoomph! She was on her back, staring at fluffy white clouds. Seconds later, Les peered down at her. Argamon, Mo, are you all right? She wiggled her fingers and toes. Everything still worked. She'd had the wind knocked out of her, that was all. Yeah, I'm okay. She pushed herself upright. I'm sorry, Les said, offering Mo her hand. I forgot about the grass. Mo grasped Les's hand and Les pulled her to her feet. I'm sorry, Les said again. I was being stupid. Forget it, Mo said, acutely aware of the warmth of Les's hand. I'm fine. Maybe we should go in. No. She reluctantly pulled her hand from Les's, not wanting to give her the wrong idea. Well, the wrong idea from Les's point of view. I want to keep playing. You sure? Les asked. Yeah, positive. Now get back over there. Mo fetched the ball and dropped it onto the grass. I'm changing the game, she shouted to Les. She wanted to show Les that she could bounce back from one little fall, and it would be boring if Les always kicked the ball directly to her. If you want the ball, you'll have to take it off me. She darted behind the ball and kicked it away from Les. Not too far, just enough so she could continue to kick it as she ran. Almost immediately, she realized what a dumb idea this was. No matter how fast she ran, she wouldn't outrun Les. Sure enough, Les's footsteps soon thudded behind her. Then Les was next to her. She almost tripped when Les stretched out her right foot and tried to get control of the ball, but she regained her footing and punted the ball away. Les darted after the ball. Mo drew on every shred of energy she had and charged after her. They reached the ball at the same time. Mo swung back her leg and kicked, but suddenly Les's leg was there, not the ball. Their legs locked. Mo tumbled forward and broke her fall with her hands. Les crashed down next to her. Silence. Then Les said, We really should go in, much to Mo's relief. Les was okay, and so was she. She rolled onto her side to agree. Enough was enough. Les lay on her back, grinning. We're asking for it otherwise, she said, rolling toward Mo. I should have insisted that. Their faces were so close, their noses were almost touching. Les's smile faded. Their eyes met. Before Mo could stop herself, she moved in and touched her lips to Les's. Oh, Les's lips were softer than she'd ever imagined. She pressed harder, slipped her arm around Les, slid closer to her. She wanted to feel Les's entire body. She wanted to hold her and squeeze her, and it felt as if someone had thrown a bucket of ice-cold water over her head. Was she out of her flaming mind? This was Les, not only the prettiest girl at the academy and probably disoriented, but her best friend, the one who'd never shown any interest in her and would probably run into the academy to throw up as soon as Mo let her go. She'd ruined everything. Now her secret was out, and Les wouldn't want anything to do with her. Mo snapped her arm to her side and drew back. Les, I'm sorry, she said, trying to move away from her, but unable to do so for some reason. I don't know what came over me. I wasn't thinking. It won't happen again, I promise. You have been listening to me, Sarah Ettritch, reading from Disobedience Means Death, my lesbian sci-fi novel. Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to Book Clips. Check out the show notes for the synopsis and buy links for this book. If you are interested in showcasing your novel, then check out the show notes for more information.